Hey, you guys, Erin here. I am back with another moon update for you. Today, I'm going to be talking about a very interesting transit we've got coming up here. This is a new moon south node solar eclipse coming up here on Wednesday, October 2nd. This new moon peaks at 11:49 a.m. Pacific time, and this all takes place in the sign of Libra. Now, what I'm going to do in this recording is I'm going to explain how to work with this energy. It's really kind of a difficult one to interpret here because anytime we have a new moon, it's a time to manifest new beginnings and growth that's related to the sign in which the new moon takes place. But with this being a south node solar eclipse, that south node is kind of like a drain point or a point of detachment. It's like what takes things away. So that's something else we want to include into our manifestations here. So what I'll do in this recording, first of all, I'm going to break down the sign of Libra for you in detail because that's really the sign that we're working with here. And I will also, of course, be pulling up the chart and showing you some other very prominent astrological forces that we are receiving. I'll break down how this eclipse works. And I will also be bringing up something that I never really talk about, which is Black Moon Lilith. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is because Black Moon Lilith is so strongly conjunct this new moon. And Black Moon Lilith has a huge influence on things like sexual trauma. Okay. And I will also be talking about certain parts of the body that are ruled by the sign of Libra, because these parts of our body become more sensitive anytime anything up in the sky transits through the sign of Libra. But with this new moon solar eclipse, we've got the sun, the moon, Mercury, and the south node all transiting through this sign of Libra. So these parts of our body, it's a really good idea to pay a little extra attention to them. So of course, I'll be mentioning some potential herbal remedies to help support these parts of our body. And I will also, of course, be talking about some gemstones that resonate well with this sign of Libra. As many of you know, anytime we have a new moon, I pull out my journal, I write down the growth that I want to experience that's related to that zodiac sign. And then I will also, if you are somewhat familiar with your natal chart, you can see which area of your life this specifically manifests for you. Or if you've had a reading with me, you can just go back and review that video recording to look to see which house in your natal chart this comes through for you. And of course, I incorporate that into my journal entry. And then I like to take some gemstones that resonate well with the astrological forces we are receiving. You can always find a full extensive list of gemstones that resonate well with the moon, the sign the moon is transiting through, in the description below. But please do not feel like discouraged or disappointed if you don't have any of these gemstones. And really, anytime we have a new moon, that is a perfect time to be manifesting gemstones into your life. I personally recommend getting kind of specific. I am manifesting a piece of tourmaline or whatever it is, that sort of thing. So let's get into this. Let's start talking about the sign of Libra. Libra is what we call the cardinal air sign. When I say cardinal, what I'm talking about is a force that projects through. All of the cardinal signs come through when we enter into a new season. As many of you know, we just had the fall equinox. We are now in fall. That's the sign of Libra that projects us into the new season. Okay, but I certainly don't see the sign of Libra as like a forceful energy at all. It's actually a pretty chill, laid back energy. And as I've said so many times before, the way that I see this Libra cardinal force come through is the Libra people. Not every single Libra out there is going to be like this, but a lot of them are, especially like Libra risings, even Moon and Libra. You can see this with Mars and Libra. These people will like stick their hand out to be like, hi, I'm Libra. Nice to meet you, that sort of thing. And it comes off as total confidence, which I've heard a lot of Libras say, like, I don't feel the confidence, but it projects itself out with that force. Now, in the element of air, all of the air signs are very strongly associated with intellect. Okay, this is Libra, Gemini, and Aquarius. Well, Libra is not super hyper intellectual like Gemini and Aquarius. Libra is a little different. Libra likes to balance things out, look at it from an intellectual perspective with balance, like trying to make sense of things with logic, that sort of thing. Now, also, this sign of Libra, let's talk about why the sign of Libra is chill. Okay, first of all, it's the sign of Libra really, it represents when the sun is setting. Okay, it's like the time of day when the sun is setting. And that's when people usually like to chill and relax, that sort of thing. But also the sign of Libra, it's ruled by Venus, which has a lot to do with beauty. Okay. Obviously, sunsets are beautiful, but this is kind of, you'll notice a lot of Libras are pretty chill for the most part. Okay. Now let's talk about this being ruled by Venus. Venus, again, Venus is the influencer of love. Okay. The planet of love. Now, amongst many other things, Venus likes harmony. Venus is like a remedy for everything, but Venus has so much to do with what we are attracted to, romantically, but also just a partnership. This sign of Libra has so much to do with partnerships, and it doesn't necessarily just mean romantic relationships. Of course, that plays a role, but also it's like anybody who you have any kind of a contract with. And I don't necessarily just mean a written contract. Of course, that can be the case as well, but it's more like, an attorney or a business partner, like somebody who even if it's a verbal contract, like, yes, I am committed to you. This sign of Libra has a lot to do that because it's like sharing your energy with another human. Okay. Now, also the sign of Libra, the motto is I balance. It's represented by the scales. That has so much to do with this, sharing your energy and balancing things out. Okay. The sign of Libra is actually very strongly associated with justice and fairness. When you go into a courtroom, you'll notice a lot of times they've got like the scales etched into some sort of, granite wall or something like that. That's because it wants justice. It wants fairness. It's such an interesting energy. Like for myself, I have my midheaven conjunct Pluto and my North Node all in the sign of Libra. Which is a very interesting thing for a Pisces to want to go into law enforcement. I got my degree in criminal justice law enforcement. Later in life, learning astrology, it made so much sense. My midheaven, the career, I wanted to work for a justice system. Later, I learned that we don't really, it's like more like an unjust system that we're dealing with here. So that didn't really work out for me. But you'll find a lot of Libra people being intrigued by things like law. Okay. Now, also the sign of Libra it's such a charming energy. I've also seen a lot of Libra people go into things like acting or something where they're on stage. They tend to do well in front of a camera. Okay, so how do you want to grow in these ways? Be thinking about that cardinal energy. Maybe you just want to manifest being able to go up and introduce yourself to people, that sort of thing. But also in that element of air, trying to balance things out logically, but also maybe this is something to do with a relationship going on in your life, and be thinking about this as well. Like maybe you want to manifest more fairness or more, justice in your relationship with a person, but be thinking about that South Node as well, because that South Node wants to drain something away. In fact, about 7 hours before the actual new moon peaks is when the moon will transit over that South Node. So if you really, set your intentions early enough, you can really work with this energy to release something of this Libra energy that is not necessarily working out for you, not serving you. Okay, so how do you want to grow in those Libra ways? Let's pull up the chart and start getting into this. If you are new here, I work with geocentric Western astrology. Thank you for tuning in. What we're looking at here is basically a snapshot of what we call the tropical zodiac at the time of this new moon. This, again, is on October 2nd, 2024 at 11:49 a.m. Pacific time. So you might want to see what time this is actually manifesting for your own time zone. Now, these things right here are the symbols for all the planets and the celestial bodies. Like here's Pluto, here's Saturn, here's Neptune, here's the North Node, here's Uranus. When we go in the wheel just a little ways, these things are the symbols for the zodiac signs. So all these things will be beaming through onto Earth at the time of this new moon. Okay, so let's start with the sun and the moon. This right here is the sun. This right here is the moon. Every single month, the sun and the moon come together because the sun takes a whole year to go around this thing. Meanwhile, the moon goes around this thing every single month. So with that said, every month, the moon catches up to the sun, and that's what creates a new moon. But what makes it a solar eclipse? Anytime we have a solar eclipse, we have to be having a new moon. But what makes it different from the average new moon is this right here. This is the South Node. When we have the new moon and either the South Node or the North Node is right next to the sun and the moon, That's what makes it an eclipse, okay, a solar eclipse. So this is what I'm saying, it's a south node solar eclipse. Okay, so this comes through at 10 degrees. My software is saying 10 degrees, 4 minutes. If you're using a Placidus house system and you really want to apply this into your own chart, I've also seen 10 minutes, 10 degrees, 3 minutes with another program. So I'm not exactly positive it's 10 degrees and 3 minutes or 10 degrees and 4 minutes. Regardless, we don't need to necessarily put that much emphasis on the minutes. Let's just stay with 10 degrees Libra. Okay, now if you are using Placidus, you do need to see where 10 degrees Libra comes through your own natal chart. If you're using, I personally like working with the whole sign house system when it comes to these lunar transits. Nothing against Placidus. I actually use it for other sort of systems of astrology. Okay, now, if you've got anything in your natal chart near 10 degrees Libra, I would say, honestly, if you've got anything in your natal chart between, let's even go down to 3 degrees, and I'm going to go all the way up to 20 degrees. That's a huge orb, but this is so much Libra energy coming through here. And not only that, but I normally use a pretty big orb. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's okay. Just gather what you can from this. I tend to use a pretty big orb when we're talking about the nodes. So anywhere between 3 degrees and 20 degrees Libra, this is an extremely powerful time for you. Okay, there's probably, you know, again, you can manifest the new beginnings, but there very well could be something that's being drained out with that south node right there. Some other signs to look out for is really all the cardinal signs. If you've got, again, anything kind of in between 3 to 20 degrees, Libra, Aries, Capricorn, or Cancer, then this is it's like a forceful time for you. If you've got anything, say near, let's go between 6 and 15 degrees, maybe even 5 to 15 degrees, Libra, or actually, sorry, a Gemini or Aquarius, this is more like a harmonious time for you. Now, that's a very big generalization here. Of course, there's all kinds of little aspects that would have to come into play here. But those are points to look at in your natal chart if you're trying to follow along here and apply this to your own chart. Okay, so 10 degrees Libra, this is just barely into the second decan of that Libra energy, but that gives it a little extra twist of Aquarius energy as well, which gives it a little more intellect. Aquarius is hyper intellectual. The motto is I know. Okay, now let's first talking about this right here is Black Moon Lilith. Okay, now Black Moon Lilith, again, is not something I usually put any kind of emphasis on unless somebody specifically asks me to. But Black Moon Lilith does have a lot to do with sexual trauma. And I don't know what kind of words I'm allowed to use here on YouTube, so I want to be really careful about that. But, forced sexual experiences, let's call it that sort of thing, or even just stepping into your feminine power. And this could be if you're male or female, like wanting to protect women, that sort of thing. But keep in mind that this is like, if you are, maybe it's just because of what I do for a living, but it seems like almost every single female that I work with, and some males too, absolutely some males, but tends to be almost every single woman that I work with, or even just younger lady, whatever, has experienced some kind of sexual trauma throughout her lifetime. And so with that said, this can be a fantastic time for releasing that. Again, here's that south node. Think about releasing that in a healthy way and manifesting those new beginnings. And I would also be very, very careful if you're, some girl in your 20s and going out to bars, that sort of thing. I would be very careful if you intend on going out partying on October 2nd. Keep yourself safe and protected. Okay, so there's that. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk, we might as well bring Mercury into the picture here. So here's Mercury, which Mercury rules over our mental function. Mercury is how we receive information. Mercury is the messenger of the gods. And Mercury is also very, very close to this solar eclipse, very close to this new moon. So that brings things into our conscious awareness. But it's in this sign of Libra. So it's like, let's kind of be practical about this. Let's balance this out. Let's maybe make justice of this. That sort of thing can come into fruition here with the blend of these energies. Now, something else I need to point out right away is this over here is Mars, which Mars is doing some interesting things. So Mars is the influencer of taking action. Mars rules our muscles, adrenal glands. Mars is what makes us go take action. Mars is often referred to as the planet of war. Mars is aggressive and dominant and ready to be revved up and go. Okay, and it's going through the sign of Cancer, which the sign of Cancer is kind of like the mother of the zodiac. The sign of Cancer tends to be very protective. It's very sensitive. The motto is I feel. And Mars just going through Cancer can have a lot to do with, all of a sudden, especially if you've got something near this in your natal chart. If you've got something near, say between, I don't know, 30, or maybe even 12 to 18 degrees Cancer, Mars is sitting on that thing. And it's like, oh, take action. Let's get this thing going. But you also might be experiencing things like, I feel like I need to protect somebody. If you're born with Mars in Cancer, a lot of times, I'm very familiar with this, you're very protective of your loved ones, that sort of thing. Well, what Mars is doing for this transit is he's sending these rays, this is a square, these red lines right here, which create a force, can definitely create an internal tension. The big one here is here's Mars and here's Mercury. I think it's either 2 or 3 days after this eclipse that Mars will make an exact square with Mercury. Okay, now that is Mars kind of like attacking the nervous system. Mercury has a huge influence on our entire nervous system. Okay, so that, again, especially if you've got something in these cardinal signs, Libra, Aries, Capricorn, or Cancer, then you might be feeling this like, there's something I gotta do here. Don't worry, there's some really good things I'm getting to here. A beautiful grand water trine. But Mars is definitely sending those forceful rays over to this new moon and solar eclipse, and especially Mercury. Mercury and Mars tend to not do so well when they're having a strong, forceful conversation like that. Okay. And also just keep in mind that sign of Cancer, it's all about feelings. And the sign of Libra is over here trying to go like, okay, well, let's try and balance this out. All right, so there's that. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about is this. Let's talk about this beautiful grand trine. I'm very happy about this. So again, here's Mars in Cancer, which, by the way, okay, for those of you who especially have a lot of water in your natal chart, I would be very, very mindful of the fluids in your body. In fact, I would be, for everybody, I'd be careful if you're out, swimming or something like that, or near a large body of water, because Mars is a malefic. Okay. I mean, again, I don't need to make Mars sound bad. We totally need Mars. Mars is great for making us go to the gym and work out, that sort of thing. But he also is a malefic, rules over things like injuries, that sort of thing. And over here, we've got Saturn going through the sign of Pisces, which we've talked a lot about. Saturn is ruler of chronic disease. And Saturn is what brings like restriction. Saturn is old Mr. Rigid that ultimately just wants us to take care of responsibilities. Saturn's like the old man that's pointing at us going, you need to be responsible. And then we think about the sign of Pisces. Pisces it's the spiritual sign. It's a sign that's of mysticism. It's a sign of oneness, okay? But Pisces is also a water sign, and it can have a lot to do with the fluids in the bodies. That's what I'm talking about. We've got the great malefic, Saturn over here, and the lesser malefic, Saturn over here, Mars over here. We got both the malefics coming through these water signs. They are harmonizing together. That's what I'm about to get into. I do like that. But they're both, it's like if I would be mindful of things like the lymphatic system. Also, the sign of Cancer rules the stomach, also rules the breasts. That's mostly what I'm putting. Pisces actually rules the lymphatic system, but the sign of Cancer rules the breasts. So this is definitely a time to be taking care of our lymphatic system and really just overall the fluids in the body. Also, the sign of Pisces rules the extracellular matrix. A really good book by Matthew Wood that has a lot to do with kind of like metaphysics, okay? That's the simplest way I can bring that up. But here's Saturn saying, be disciplined, anything that has to do with that sign of Pisces. I think this has a lot to do with a lot of people doing, their spiritual practices, taking them very, very seriously. I have noticed a lot of people are doing things like cleanses, water fasts, that sort of thing, because that can also like open up the pineal gland and just overall give you a lot of cleansing, that sort of thing. And I think a lot of that has to do with Saturn going through Pisces. But these guys are harmonizing together. And then over here, we've got Venus going through the sign of Scorpio, 11 degrees Scorpio. So Venus, that's not necessarily her favorite zodiac sign to be in. But keep in mind, Venus is kind of like the goddess of this solar eclipse because she rules the sign of Libra. Okay, Venus, again, influences things like love and romance and sensuality. Okay, the sign of Scorpio is a very, very sexual sign, actually rules the genitals. It's a very fierce sign, and it's in part why Venus is slightly debilitated in this sign of Scorpio, because Venus wants to be soothing and harmonious and gentle and lovey, and Scorpio is like, this is a scorpion, right? But with all this said, Venus, in my opinion, I think she's kind of calming these guys down. Like I said, Venus is almost like a remedy for everything. And here we have the malefics harmonizing this. When we see this blue triangle here, that's called a grand trine. This is specifically a grand water trine. Here we have Scorpio as a water sign, Cancer is a water sign, Pisces is a water sign. This is also why I'm saying be mindful about if you are out swimming or that sort of thing, just be careful. Also, just be careful about the waters around you. But overall, this can be good for breaking through. All the water signs are very strongly associated with emotions and feelings. This could be a really good influence for kind of pushing through an emotional process, that sort of thing, which can be very good for an eclipse. So keep in mind also, if you've got anything in any of the water signs, say between, let's go with 9 degrees to, let's go 9 degrees to maybe even 19 degrees in Cancer, Scorpio, or Pisces, then there's a lot going on for you right now, a lot of energy coming in. Okay, now let's talk about Jupiter going through Gemini. So Jupiter, the great benefic, okay, Jupiter is the bringer of luck and abundance and wisdom, but really, Jupiter is kind of like the professor, okay? Jupiter is a very much of wisdom and faith and charity, okay? And the sign of Gemini, this is going on till June of 2025. The sign of Gemini is like the student, okay? It's the motto is I think. So with Jupiter, the professor kind of beaming his rays through the student, okay, this could be a very good time for studying things that can actually even have a lot to do with freedom. Now, this is just coming into my brain right now. Jupiter wants freedom. Jupiter loves the freedom and natural law, things that are of an advanced knowledge, that sort of thing. Be really, especially if you got something near 21 degrees Gemini or 21 degrees Libra or 21 degrees Aquarius, because that would they'd be harmonizing with that transit. So this could be a really good time for opening up the consciousness to new information, that sort of thing. And especially if it's got anything to do with healing, okay? This right here is Chiron beaming through the sign of Aries, the sign of self. So Chiron's the wounded healer, and has so much to do with healing our wounds, healing deep, buried into our subconscious kind of wounds that potentially come from early childhood, that sort of thing, wounds that come from a previous lifetime, that sort of thing. So coming through the sign of self, Aries is the warrior. It says, let's go. But these guys are having a extremely strong, to the degree, sextile aspect here going on between Jupiter and Chiron. That's opportunity. Okay, so going back to this studying things that would open up your consciousness or be able to take you to, I happen to have a lot of friends, and you guys are watching, I just love you guys so much, who are studying things like natural law, things that are out of the Black's Law Dictionary and that sort of thing, things that are going beyond what the normal people are aware of, okay? And it's creating this opportunity, and that can actually lead to a lot of healing. I think a lot of us have trauma just from the world that we live in, the civilization that we live in, and that kind of aspect can actually bring a lot of healing to that. Okay, now the next thing I want to talk about, I'm trying to decide where I should go to next. Let's briefly touch on the North Node here, and then I'll go into what I really wanted to mention. So the North Node opposite the South Node. So the South Node again is the drain point. That's the point of detachment. It's a very, very spiritual point. And by the way, these nodes are not planets at all. The word node is actually basically Latin for knot, as in K-N-O-T. These nodes are the knots that tie the moon's ecliptic to Earth, and they rule over the journey of our soul. The South Node is more like leaving stuff behind, versus the North Node is what brings new energy in. This is like the pump that brings energy in. It's going through that sign of Aries. Now, this is, an aggressive energy for sure. I think that there's been a lot of it. I've just been, can't help but sort of giggle about the fact that the North Node is going through the warrior of the zodiac. So the pump is going through the sign of aggression. It's the pioneer. So it's ruled by Mars. Aries is ruled by Mars, which again is the planet of war. So a lot of aggression coming in through this North Node going through the sign of Aries. So we are receiving that. But if you've got anything near 6 degrees Aries in your natal chart, that whatever it is, let's say it's Jupiter, then North Node's pumping more of that Jupiterian energy in your life. Everything might be expanding in your life. Or let's say it's Mercury. All of a sudden your mental function's going like neurons connecting wildly, that sort of thing. So keep that in mind as well. Okay, now let's lastly touch on this. Okay, so this right here is Uranus, which has been going through the sign of Taurus, I think, since 2017, maybe 2018. Uranus influence is very abrupt and revolutionary changes, but also Uranus, it creates like electrical disturbances. You know, we live in this electromagnetic field, just our toroidal field, all of it. And Uranus has a lot of an influence on that, can actually create disturbances in good ways and bad ways. Was going through the sign of Taurus, which we talked about this. Taurus rules money, rules agriculture, rules food. We're seeing all kinds of wild and strange changes going on involving our food and our finances and that sort of thing. I do think this can have a lot to do with that. But Uranus is working very, very powerfully while in retrograde. Now, next thing I need to talk about Neptune going through Pisces, because I'm going to talk about I've talked about Uranus, but I'm also going to talk about Neptune, and I'm going to talk about Pluto, because all of these guys are kind of working together right now. And it's actually a very, very fascinating combination of aspects here. So Neptune rules the sign of Pisces. We talked about how Pisces is the mystic of the zodiac. It's the sign of oneness and flowiness and, you know, kind of a very compassionate energy. The motto is, I believe. It's very faith-based. Well, Neptune is what makes Pisces that way, in part, because Neptune is Pisces' ruler. Okay, Neptune is the god of the sea. Neptune can be very diffusive, but together here with Neptune going through Pisces, this has people just exceptionally like intuition wide open right now. People taking all their spiritual practices very seriously, because Neptune going to Pisces and Neptune going to Pisces and Saturn going to Pisces. But these guys have the Neptune and the sign of Pisces, really both of them are really what kind of rule over our spiritual body, okay? Our spiritual experiences. This is very much the extracellular matrix. And then over here, and that's also going to retrograde, by the way, and here's Pluto, which Pluto is the bringer of very powerful transformation. Pluto influences power, but not necessarily like, here's some power. It's like you got to go through that deep, powerful, transformational process to be empowered. That's really what Pluto influences. Pluto is also in retrograde at 29 degrees. That's the anaretic degree in retrograde. This is the last time Pluto is going to do this. We've talked about this so many times. Pluto's been tick-tocking back and forth. Moved into the sign of Aquarius, retrograded back. Moved into the sign of Aquarius, retrograded back. Moved into the sign of Aquarius, retrograded back. This is the last time he's going to be at his 29th degree in retrograde. This is a very, very forceful energy coming through. Sign of Capricorn, as a collective, rules over things like our government, rules over things that are of structure, things like the structure of our cities and our buildings and that sort of thing. In the body, the sign of Capricorn rules the structure of the body, really like the entire skeletal system. Also has a big influence on the knees. If you've got anything near 29 degrees Capricorn, please be very careful of your knees, of really all of your bones. But Pluto also really rules our psyche, okay? Our spiritual willpower. Like Pluto's the kind of influence. And we're always experiencing Pluto. We're always experiencing all of these guys, but there's just certain times in our life where they're going to be stronger they might be stronger for this person at this time, but not for this person at that same time. And then stronger for this person at a different time. It just depends on how these things are hitting our own natal chart. But really, again, just kind of stepping back and focusing on the collective here, that Pluto is something like it would make somebody, quit some bad habits. Somebody, with chain smoking cigarettes for 20 years, all of a sudden they're having a Pluto transit. That spiritual willpower, like I'm going to do this, comes through with Pluto. And then we're empowered through that process. Okay, well, here we have this sextile going from Pluto to Neptune. So we've got sextile, which these green lines are called sextile. They're approximately a 60-degree angle. And what they basically create is opportunity. Okay, so we've got Uranus, electrical, spasmodic, making opportunity, spiritualism, mysticism, Neptune and Pisces, making opportunity with that spiritual willpower in that sign of Capricorn. This is a really, really interesting blend of energies because these are what most people would refer to as like the outer planets, or they're the slowest moving of all those, what we refer to as planets, wandering stars, I guess. But it's generational influences. Like you're going to be born, your whole generation would be born with Neptune in the same zodiac sign. Your whole generation would be born with Pluto in the same zodiac sign because they move slowly. Okay. It's like Pluto sometimes takes 20 years to go through one zodiac sign. Neptune somewhere around 12 years, something like that. So they move slow. So for all of these guys to be making that combination of aspects is actually quite lovely. It's like spiritual, revolutionary, powerful, all those things combined. So I do like that combination of aspects quite a lot. Okay, so did I cover everything I wanted to? If you're seeing things that I haven't covered, it's because it's based on my own location. Okay, so let's get into body parts. Okay, so the sign of Libra rules the kidneys, rules the ovaries, rules all the balances in the body, things like hormonal balances, even acid alkaline balances, that sort of thing. Rules over the lumbar. Did I miss anything here? We just want to be really careful with these parts of our body during this kind of transit, especially if you're already, experiencing issues with those parts of our body. Now, of course, I'm not a doctor and I'm not trying to offer any kind of medical advice whatsoever. But for myself, I'm kind of like as a collective, I would always check in with your healthcare practitioner. You don't know what you're allergic to, that sort of thing. But when it comes to the kidneys, goldenrod is like a warming agent and can also help to heal, for the most part, can help to heal the tissue of the liver. Okay, the next one, and you can get goldenrod in a tea or a tincture. Personally, I really like tinctures because, like, here's a tincture right here. I just leave all my little tinctures around the house. So I'll be like, oh, yeah, I should take some of that right now. It's good medicine. But you can also just get it as a tea. I do highly recommend with any of the herbs that I ever bring up on here, I really do recommend going with organic. And because the herbs tend to be very sensitive to things like herbicides and pesticides and that sort of thing, they'll suck it up and then we take those things in and then it messes with our body's natural processes. Okay. Now, next one I wanted to mention is parsley. Parsley is fantastic. I mean, just eating parsley is so good for the kidneys. It's very detoxifying, but that's something else you could also make a tincture with. If you don't, tinctures usually, I like to let my tinctures sit for at least 6 months. I usually let it go a year. It kind of depends on what I'm working with. When I'm talking about tinctures, is for a generalization here, it's like you take the herb and you put it in an alcohol. And that's what it brings the medicine out, and the alcohol helps to drive that medicine into your cells. But parsley You can do a tincture. You can also just, take parsley. And what I'll do sometimes is take the parsley, put it in like a steamer or a pot. I put water in the pot and I put the parsley in the little steamer thing. And then I let that steam for, half an hour or something like that on low. And then I'll let that water cool down and I'll just drink that water. It's like a fresh parsley tea. You can also do dried parsley. One thing with parsley, though, I have read that if you have kidney stones, you might want to be very careful with parsley. Okay, sarsaparilla can be really good for balancing the hormones. That's another one, tea or tincture. Sarsaparilla is a wonderful, that's, one of those things where I don't know any damages that could be caused from sarsaparilla. I mean, you can always overdo it with anything, right? You want to be mindful about all this stuff. Okay, for lumbar, royal fern is really, really good for lumbar pain. And then the next one I was going to mention for hormone balance is actually what this is. Black cohosh. I hope I'm pronouncing that properly because I've never heard somebody else say it. I've only read it. But black cohosh, this is something that I take as a 46-year-old woman to try and, it can be kind of good for things like night sweats or basically perimenopause sort of stuff, hot flashes, that sort of thing. And not that I don't really have that severely going on, but because of my age, I like to indulge in black cohosh. And by the way, this is from a company, a wonderful lady. Her name is Catherine. Her company is called Enlightened Body, and she sells her stuff on, oh boy, what is it? Etsy. Okay. And a lot of this information that I'm getting regarding these herbs comes from this book. I mean, I get the information from lectures and all sorts of books, but a lot of this is coming from this particular book. This is Judith Hill's most recent of her many, many books. And I think it's probably one of my favorites. There's a couple of her books that I really love to read. I mean, I've read them like 3 times, but this one, even if you don't even know anything about astrology, you don't know how to read a natal chart, anything like that, but you know your sun sign and you know your moon sign and your rising sign, that sort of thing. This book you might find really, really interesting because it talks about, it's called the 12 Zodiac Signs Syndromes of Medical Astrology. And it offers basically some remedies for, things that might be going on because the signs that you were born under, that sort of thing. So that's where I'm getting a lot of that information from. Okay, let's get into gemstones. So the dedicated zodiacal birthstone for the sign of Libra is opal. So I put Grandma's opal on today. Opals are also said to help with balancing things out in the body, just balancing things out in your life, your environment, that sort of thing. Of course, anything I talk about with these gemstones is very metaphysical. But this is stuff that I've read and experienced for myself. A lot of the information that I get from about gemstones comes from the Encyclopedia of Crystals by Judy Hall. The next one I'm going to mention here is rose quartz. I love this tool right here. This is basically just like a massaging tool that is so wonderful. Rose quartz is interesting because personally, I have never really liked the color pink. Nothing against other people wearing pink. My sister loves pink. She wears it all the time. It's actually quite adorable, but I've never been a pink kind of person. I don't have pink things in my house or anything like that. I don't think I own anything pink, like as wardrobe goes. But I do love rose quartz. It's a very calming stone. It is said to do all kinds of things. It's like can open up your pineal gland. It can help you calm down. It can help you feel, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess just kind of balanced out. If I can't think of any kind of a natal chart where rose quartz would not be good for somebody. I mean, maybe if somebody's super, super lazy or something like that, then they might need, and they have no, nervous system that's overacting or anything like that. Then they might want something that's a little more stimulating. But rose quartz, for the most part, is a wonderful stone and resonates beautifully with the sign of Libra. Okay, the next one I'm going to mention here, this right here is blue kyanite, which is also one of my favorite stones, resonates beautifully with the sign of Libra. One of the reasons that I love blue kyanite is because the color is gorgeous. I do love blue, but it's very, very protective, but also calming. And in fact, I'm going to bring this one up right now. This right here is black kyanite, which is extremely protective. And I don't know. I've never seen any scientific proof of this, but it is said that this can help protect us from those dangerous electromagnetic fields coming from all of our devices. But the reason, I mean, of course, I love both of them, but the blue kind I just think is a little prettier. That's just me, but they both resonate well with the sign of Libra. I do kind of, if you've got any kind of protective stones, any eclipse, I think it's probably a good idea to be, keeping some sort of protective stone near you. Mostly the black stones tend to be a little more protective. That's not always the case. Obviously, this is not a dark black stone. But for the most part, another thing is like earth tone stones can also, in a way, be protective and kind of soothing and calming, that sort of thing. Okay, I think I will leave that there. Now, one thing I want to mention here is that I really don't recommend going outside and exposing ourselves to an eclipse. I know a lot of people do, and nothing against it. I just personally would not do it. I've told this story before. I've had actually two experiences. One was a really big one, was in the 2017 Great American Solar Eclipse in the sign of Leo. I was not as well educated about eclipses back in those days, and I thought I was going to do this hyper spiritual ceremony. I went out to this little spring near where I live. I put my feet in the water, and I was like, fully just ready to take on the eclipse energy. And I kid you not, as somebody who I really very rarely in my life have dealt with anxiety, I worry about everything. Moon conjunct Mars in Cancer. Okay, worry the heck out of everything. But anxiety is not something that I deal with very often. That day, I had the most horrible anxiety. I was like, this is what this is? There's people that live like this? Oh my God, it was awful. Absolutely awful. I've heard nightmare stories from my teachers, what they've experimented with during eclipses, from friends. But then I've also heard people that are like, oh, I saw the eclipse, nothing happened to me. So that's just my opinion. Our ancestors did not go out there and expose themselves to eclipses. So I'm going to stick with what they did. I just recommend kind of going inside, and, even just like if you have to be outside during the eclipse, you're probably going to be okay, but it's just not what I would want to be doing. I try to stay inside. The second time that it happened was just a couple years ago when I knew it was the day of the eclipse, but it just so happened that my dog needed to go outside and go potty, and I brought him outside. I just wasn't thinking about the eclipse, but I brought him outside, and within seconds, like 30 seconds, I was like, oh my God, I'm feeling this. And then it hit me. I was like, oh, what time is it? And it was like 5 minutes before the eclipse happened. And so I let him go potty and came back inside, and I was okay. I surrounded myself with all my little gemstones and that sort of thing. And I was just fine. And maybe it's just because I'm super sensitive, but that's my story with eclipses. Maybe 2 hours before the eclipse to 2 hours afterwards is when I would try, if you can, avoid, putting yourself out there. Okay, so I will leave that there. If you would like to schedule an astrology reading, please do visit erinwageastrology.com. I do hope to hear from some of you. And until next time, namaste to all of you.